Quote, "The map of Nigeria beat my imagination and troubles my sensibility. I get angry looking how foolish it looks." End quote.
Wow. That is, that's really candid.
It's raw, right? I mean, welcome to today's deep dive, everyone. I'm your host, and that quote is the opening salvo from the source we're deconstructing today.
And I'm your resident expert for this deep dive. The paper we're looking at is titled The Cardinal Truth, Challenging the Cartography of Nigeria.
And the author doesn't just stop at being angry, by the way. They actually describe the current map of their country as a political gerrymander.
Right. They call it a system of lies designed to favor one region over another.
Exactly. And the part that really stuck with me, the part I couldn't stop thinking about, is that they say this map has been making them furious since their elementary school days.
That's a deeply visceral reaction. Because usually, when we talk about maps, we're just talking about navigation.
Yeah, getting from point A to point B without driving into a lake.
Exactly. But this source is hitting on something much deeper. They're looking at a map and they're seeing a weapon.
Which perfectly sets up the mission for our deep dive today. We really need to figure out, for you, the listener, can a map actually be a lie?
Because this author isn't just complaining about a crooked borderline or, a typo in a city name.
No, they are arguing that the map creates a false territorial integrity, that it physically stretches the north to occupy southern regions. It's a massive accusation.
It really is. But to weigh that accusation fairly, to understand how a map even could lie, we have to zoom out. We can't just look at Nigeria.
We have to look at the invisible scaffold that holds up every single map on Earth.
Right. We need to understand the difference between what is physically true about our planet and what is just, a human opinion dressed up as science.
So consider this your crash course in the cartography of truth. We're going to start with these really fiery claims about the Nigerian map, and then we're going to strip cartography down to the studs.
The cardinal directions, the equator, the prime meridian.
All of it. We need to answer a pretty fundamental question for you today. Which lines on our map are real physical facts, and which ones are just agreements made by men in a room?
It's a distinction that completely changes how you see the world. So let's start with the so-called lie.
All right, let's get into the source material. The cardinal truth. I've read a lot of academic papers, and they usually have this very dry, detached tone. This does not.
No, it is incredibly passionate. It reads almost like a manifesto.
It does. The author claims that so-called geographers and academicians have completely failed to point out these geographic errors.
And they offer a reason why, right? They suggest these experts are basically benefiting from the government of the day, and they just don't want to rock the boat.
Yeah. Now, to be clear to you listening, we are not taking a stance on the internal politics of Nigeria here. We are just impartially looking at the author's argument.
Exactly. We're analyzing the claim that a map itself acts as a political tool. This is actually a classic element of critical geography, though it's usually not phrased quite so bluntly. The accusation is that the map isn't just a drawing. It is an instrument of state power. The author explicitly says the map creates a false territorial integrity, and they are demanding scientific-based evidence to dismantle these misconceptions.
It sounds almost like a conspiracy theory at first glance, doesn't it? Like the government is lying to you about the literal shape of the country.
It does. But when you strip away the emotion, isn't there a really valid point about perception there?
I think so, yeah. Because maps frame our understanding of reality.
If you grow up seeing your region depicted a certain way, maybe it looks smaller, maybe it's pushed off to the side, it shapes your identity.
Like the author mentioning this anger started in elementary school. That tells you how deep these images go into our subconscious.
It becomes part of your internal logic about how your country works. It's the background radiation of your childhood.
That's a great way to put it. But what's really fascinating here is that the author isn't just arguing politics. They are appealing directly to science.
Yes. They aren't just saying, I feel this is wrong. They're saying, this is scientifically incorrect. They want to use scientific-based evidence to prove the map is a fraud.
Which brings us to the core of this deep dive. If we're going to judge whether a map is wrong, we have to know the rules of the game. We can't just go by vibes.
Definitely not. So let's look at that evidence. What are the actual rules of the map? The source spends a lot of time establishing the absolute basics, specifically the cardinal directions.
Right, because this is the foundation. You can't argue about borders if you don't even agree on which way is up.
Exactly. So the source breaks down the cardinal directions, north, east, south, and west.
I learned this with a mnemonic that the source actually mentions, which is never eat soggy waffles. Going clockwise, of
A
course.
classic.
Although looking back, soggy waffles is a weirdly specific dietary restriction for a kid to memorize.
It is. Depending on where you grew up, it might have been never eat shredded wheat.
Oh, that's a good one, too.
But the point this source makes is that these aren't just little rhymes for children.
Hmm.
Mathematically, these are precise angles. They're azimuths.
Azimuths. Okay, break that down for us, because I feel like that's a word I constantly pretend to understand when I hear it in movies.
Fair enough. An azimuth is basically just an angular measurement in a spherical coordinate system.
Okay.
Is how we translate a circle into a direction. So north is 0 degrees or 360 degrees, completing the circle. East is exactly 90 degrees. South is 180. West is 270. It's a perfect mathematical grid.
And the source gets even more granular than that, right? They list intercardinal directions like northeast at exactly 45 degrees.
Yes, and then they get into secondary intercardinal directions.
I love those names. West, northwest, south, southeast. It sounds like shipping forecast poetry.
It really does. But it gives us a sense of total control. The idea is if we can name the direction with that much precision, we can navigate it.
But here's the philosophical question that connects right back to the Nigerian map controversy. Are north and south actually real?
Well, physically, yes.
I mean, if I walk north, I am going north. I'm not just walking somewhere.
True. But the source makes a really important distinction here between the objective and the subjective.
Mm-hmm.
Objectively, yes, cardinal points are scientific. They are based on astronomical realities.
Right, the Earth rotates on an axis.
Exactly. That rotation gives us a definitive north and south pole.
Yeah.
And the sun rises in the east and sets in the west. That gives us a definitive east-west axis. Those are not opinions. You can't just vote on where the sun rises.
Okay, so that clearly supports the science side. The author of the paper is right to appeal to science because these directions are fixed facts.
To a point, yes. But the source also calls them subjective in their application.
How so?
Think about how we actually use directions in daily life. The source notes that the north isn't just a compass point. It can be a mindset. It can be an entire political block.
Ah, I see. So when the author of our source complains about the North occupying the South in Nigeria, they aren't talking about magnetic fields at all.
No, they're talking about power dynamics.
That makes total sense. We do that globally, too. We say the global South. It isn't literally just everyone below the equator. It's a socioeconomic term.
Exactly. And even in basic navigation, humans don't always use degrees. The source mentions that we rely heavily on mental maps and relative terms. We just point and say, oh, it's that way.
Right.
So the direction itself is physics.
Right.
But the significance we attach to it is storytelling. And that is exactly where the trouble starts.
So to synthesize this for you listening, the author is angry because the story the map tells about the North and South feels wrong to them, even if the compass points on the paper are technically accurate.
Yes, they feel the representation of the land is distorted by politics.
And if we want to find lines that are arguably more real than others, lines that might vindicate or disprove this whole idea of political distortion, we have to look at the grid itself, latitude and longitude.
Let's pivot to the grid. Because if you're arguing that a country is being stretched on a map, which is what this author implies, you are essentially arguing about the space between these grid lines.
Let's start with the horizontal ones, latitude.
Right. Latitude measures how far north or south you are. And the anchor for all of this, the absolute boss of the map, is the equator.
The big zero, 0 degrees latitude.
Now, if we are looking for the most honest line on the entire map, the equator is the undisputed champion. The source material is very clear on this. The equator is defined entirely physically by the Earth's rotation.
It's the line exactly halfway between the North and South poles.
Yes. So unlike a border between two countries, no men in a room sat down and decided where the equator goes.
Physics put it there.
Exactly. And it has distinct, undeniable physical properties. For example, the source notes that the Earth actually bulges at the equator.
The equatorial bulge. I've heard this term before, but explain it for us. Is the Earth not perfectly round?
It is not a perfect sphere, no. It's an oblate spheroid. Because the Earth is spinning so fast, centrifugal force pushes the middle out.
Like spinning pizza dough.
That is a perfect analogy. The Earth is significantly wider at the equator than it would be if you measured it straight through from pole to pole. And that bulge has real-world consequences. Gravity is actually slightly weaker at the equator because you're further away from the Earth's center of mass.
Wait, really? I would weigh less at the equator.
Just a tiny bit, about 0.5% less. But it's enough of a physical reality that the source mentions the equator is the absolute best place to launch satellites.
Why is that? Because of the weaker gravity?
It's two reasons, actually. First, the spin of the Earth is fastest at its widest point, which is the equator. It's like flinging something off the edge of a spinning merry-go-round. You get a massive free speed boost.
Oh, that makes sense.
And second, yes, because gravity is slightly weaker due to that extra distance from the center, the rockets have slightly less gravitational force to fight against to get into orbit.
That is wild. So the equator isn't just a line drawn on a map, it's a literal launch pad.
Exactly. And it determines our global climate. The source points out that the equator defines the hot, humid regions. It has consistent 12-hour daylight year-round and usually just 2 seasons, wet and dry.
It's a biological and physical reality.
It is.
So if you were some dictator and you wanted to arbitrarily move the equator on your national map to make your country look more tropical or more centrally located, you couldn't do it. You would be objectively, scientifically wrong.
You would be fighting physics, and physics always wins.
Okay, so latitude, and specifically the equator, is a scientific fact. It's the absolute truth part of our cartography of truth. But now we have to talk about the vertical lines. Longitude.
This is where it gets really interesting, and this is exactly where the lie, or at least the arbitrariness that the author is so angry about, becomes possible.
We're talking about the prime meridian, 0 degrees longitude.
The prime meridian. Today, as most people know, it runs straight through Greenwich, England. But unlike the equator, the source explicitly calls the prime meridian a human invention.
But wait, don't we need a starting point for east and west? We have a natural starting point for north and south.
We absolutely need one for navigation, but nature didn't give us one.
Because the Earth spins east to west.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There is no natural middle or beginning to that spin. Any vertical line drawn from the North Pole to the South Pole is physically identical to any other vertical line.
So why is it in England? Why isn't 0 degrees in, say, Cairo or Beijing or Abuja?
History and pragmatism. The source details that this specific decision was made at an International Meridian Conference in 1884. Before that conference, it was absolute chaos on the oceans.
How so?
Different countries just used their own prime meridians. The French measured 0 from Paris. The Americans measured 0 from Washington, D.C.
Oh, wow. Can you imagine the confusion for sailors trying to coordinate?
It was a nightmare. You'd ask, what time is it, or where are we? And the answer would completely depend on whether you were looking at a French map or a British map.
You'd have to do complex math just to figure out where you were relative to another ship right next to you.
Literally. So in 1884, these delegates sat down in a room to standardize it once and for all. And they chose Greenwich not because of some hidden geographic truth, but because, as the source puts it, it was a pragmatic choice.
Pragmatic for who, though?
For the people with the most ships. British shipping charts totally dominated world commerce at the time. Most of the world's ships were already using Greenwich as their 0 point just to survive the trade routes.
Ah. So it was a victory of commerce and politics, not science.
Exactly.
I see. So if the equator is what the Earth physically is, the prime meridian is just what humans agreed on.
That is the perfect way to summarize it.
And the source makes this really sharp distinction between subjective placement and objective application. Can you explain that for the listener? It sounds a bit technical.
It sounds technical, but it's actually quite simple. The placement, deciding to put 0 degrees in London, was entirely subjective and arbitrary. We could have put 0 in Nigeria. We could have put it in the middle of the Pacific Ocean.
Right.
But the application is objective. Once they agreed on it in 1884, it became the fixed mathematical standard.
Mm-hmm.
Now, our modern GPS systems, the WGS84 data that runs the maps on your smartphone, time zones like GMT, they all rely on that arbitrary line being treated as if it were an absolute, unshakable truth.
Which connects right back to the Nigerian map controversy we started with.
It does.
The author is angry because they feel the map is a lie. And what we're finding is that maps are actually this weird, messy cocktail. Some parts are unshakable physical facts, like the equator, and some parts are just political agreements that froze in time.
Yes. And borders, which is what the Nigerian author is ultimately so upset about, are the ultimate imaginary lines.
They're much more like the prime meridian than the equator.
Exactly. They're political decisions drawn on paper,
Yeah.
often by people who had never even walked the land they were dividing up.
So when the author says the map is a political gerrymander, they're tapping into the reality that someone, somewhere, drew a line that didn't necessarily respect the physical reality of the ground.
Or the cultural reality of the people living there. Maps always flatten complexity. They take a living, breathing landscape and they force it into a static, two-dimensional geometry.
You know, the source material had one other really interesting comparison that I want to throw in here before we wrap up. It mentions the sagittal plane.
Ah, yes. A brief, sudden tangent into human anatomy.
It just struck me as such a cool, weird connection for a cartography paper. I actually had to look it up to be sure I remembered my biology correctly. The sagittal plane is the imaginary vertical line that divides the human body into left and right.
Right. Just as the prime meridian divides the Earth into east and west hemispheres, the sagittal plane divides the human body. And specifically, the mid-sagittal plane divides it into perfectly equal halves.
But why does an academic paper about Nigerian geography bring up human anatomy at all?
It's brilliant, actually. It illustrates our deep human obsession with grids. Whether we are trying to understand a massive planet or a single human body, we feel this need to draw lines right through the middle of it.
You have to slice it up to make sense of it.
Exactly. It's how the human brain processes extreme complexity. We impose order onto nature.
We love symmetry.
We craze it. We want the world to be perfectly balanced, north and south, east and west, left and right. But the Earth is a messy, bulging rock. And countries are made of messy, complex histories.
So when we try to force them into a clean, symmetrical grid, something always gets distorted.
Always. And that distortion is exactly where the anger from our source comes from.
It's what happens when we mistake the map for the territory itself.
Precisely.
So let's bring this all back home for you. We started today with a very angry author writing the cardinal truth, claiming that the map of Nigeria violates its territorial integrity.
And while we, as outsiders, can't validate the specific political claims about Nigeria's internal borders without a ton more data, we absolutely can validate the feeling behind their argument. The author is sensing that the map is a palimpsest.
Oh, that's a great word. You should explain that for the listener. It was actually in the title of one of our background sources, too.
It's a great concept. A palimpsest is an old manuscript where the original writing has been erased or scraped off to make room for later writing, but traces of the original still remain underneath.
And a map is exactly that.
Yes, a map is a foundational layer of physics. The physical land, the equator, the spin of the globe written over by a heavy layer of human history. The prime meridian, the borders, the political decisions of the day.
And the author is essentially arguing that the political layer is actively obscuring the physical and cultural reality of the land.
Yes, they are arguing that the political layer is a lie. And in the world of cartography, we have to admit that is always a possibility. Every single projection of a round Earth onto a flat piece of paper distorts something.
Some make the North look way bigger, like the Mercator projection we all grew up with in school.
Right. Some stretch the middle. Every single map makes a choice.
That is the big takeaway for you today. A map is never just a neutral picture of the ground. It is a document of human decisions.
Absolutely. When you look at Google Maps or a vintage wall map in a classroom, you are looking at a blend of absolute true things that physically cannot be otherwise, like the equator and a whole lot of history and politics that just happen to stick.
So here is my final provocative thought for you to chew on today. Next time you pull up a map on your phone to find a local coffee shop, or you look at a globe in a library, really look at those lines.
Ask yourself the hard questions.
Exactly. Ask yourself, which of these lines are here because the Earth is spinning at 1,000 miles an hour? And which of these lines are here because a group of men in a room in 1884, or a government today, just decided they should be?
It completely changes how you see the world around you.
It really does.
Keep challenging the cartography, everyone. We'll see you in the next deep dive.